mild and as meek as a mouse. When I hear a command, I obey.
Well, hey, thank you so much for taking a minute out. I love this project. I'm looking forward to getting into it. So thank you for coming together to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us. We're excited to
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah. So let's be before we get into the album and how you two came together and your music lives. I know we're all getting tired of COVID, but it was such a big thing for the musicians in the world and just in general. I mean, it was such a shapeshifter in so many ways. So, did she get scared? Did I run her out of the room?
I'm sorry. No, I was
I'm
just
joking. I'm joking. I'm
the
like, I'm
dishwasher
sorry.
was making a noise, so I just opened it because I
Like,
didn't want
sorry about this COVID thing. You're like, I'm out. See you later.
to.
So, I want to know, how did you survive that time period and how did it ultimately either influence this album or the way that you do things now?
I think it was, I mean, obviously it was a super turbulent time in everybody's lives, but for us, it was actually the moment where I think it brought us together, like closest musically as friends. Coincidentally, we were both in Illinois getting our master's degree, and we were about to finish when COVID hit. So we were forced to come back home to Miami, which is where we're both from. And considering the fact that Miami kind of moved on relatively quickly compared to the rest of the nation,
Yeah.
I, we got a regular Friday night gig pretty much immediately by like November of 2020. We started doing this. I got called for this regular gig, and I called her and I was like, it was indoors. I was like, hey, do you feel comfortable doing this? She's like, yeah, of course. And that turned into a 2 year long weekly gig where we were able to just grow as musicians, grow, as a friendship, and we were able to play a lot together. So in that way, it was pretty awesome,
Yeah.
considering everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we both our paths kind of mimicked each other. So we both ended up returning back to Miami at the same time, hoping to move to New York in like May of 2020. So we kind of came home and I mean, it obviously was difficult. There was a lot in our personal lives and a lot going on in the world, of course. But like she said, like Miami moved on pretty quickly. So I don't know if that was a good thing. I mean, it was a good thing for us because
Right.
we were able to work pretty quickly. I know a lot of people were out of work for a long time.
Yeah.
And we're both also teaching. So it was a harsh or hard like acceptance because we're performers through and through, but we love teaching. But I think there was a time there that we thought, maybe this is like going to be our lives now, like just being high school teachers and college teachers. And so, I mean, it's definitely difficult, but I mean, obviously some good came out of it.
Yeah.
But it was a tough time.
Well, I mean, Florida responded. I mean, that was the other thing about this. When you look at the landscape of musicians, every single region responded differently. And when this started, I ramped up my interviews in a way that I never did before. And when I
Mm.
would talk to people from New York, you can only play an instrument for so long when you're in a complex in Brooklyn
Yeah.
before the neighbors are like, all right, that's enough, you know, right? So if you're in an area that's more lax and you can get out and you have sunshine and different weather patterns and an ocean and all of these other things, your mental health is already in a better place. You already you have an upper hand. So yeah, it kind of regionally was a different thing. So talk to me a little bit about this album. How did from the inception of the idea to it actually being in fruition and something in your hands right now? How did this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been friends for a very long time. We met when we were in high school, and playing together was at first just something that we did because we were both musicians in the community. And again, like she said, it wasn't until 2020 when we both moved back to Miami. I mean, we were both in Illinois. We
Hmm.
played a little bit together there, but it wasn't until we got back to Miami in 2020 that we started playing more and then really building this like symbiotic relationship in our respective instruments through that one weekly gig that we had. It was like a 4 hour long gig, and it was just like piano bar, requests and playing music that we like to play. We pretty much had free reign. So I think we just started playing, and then after months of doing this gig, we started doing things that eventually became arrangements without us knowing. And it just became our little shtick, our little thing that we'll do. And I know where she's gonna go with it, and then she's like, "Oh, are you gonna do the thing?" And then we would end up doing the thing, or sometimes we didn't, and we would laugh about it. And it was just like this thing that started growing in that time. And then obviously as the pandemic subsided, like more gigs. So we started doing the thing. We had a lot of people in Miami who loved hearing us play together. So we had, people at our gigs come see us, come to this gig just for us. And then it was just like time, we were both in our, at the time, I can't believe I'm saying this because we're almost 30 now, but at the time we were like in our early mid 20s.
Hmm.
And we were just like, it's the next step. It's the next thing to do is to put out a project. We both had not yet, and we had both kind of gotten this far in our careers, had done amazing things with no project.
Yeah.
And that's like the cool thing about this genre is that you can kind of get away with that. And so I think it was just like the next step.
Yeah.
And then so we just started thinking, what would we put on this thing? And so then we just started kind of workshopping this music in our live gigs. We were playing together sometimes 6 nights a week,
Yeah.
like really often, and teaching together and hanging out all the time and slaying it in the gym all the time. So it was like we had like a lot of time together. And I think that it was just like, but we have to do this. We have to do
Yeah.
this. We really created something special. So I think that's kind of, we were just like, we got to do it. Yeah.
Well, in getting into jazz music, you're not talking about a profession that's going to be lucrative. There's very few people that make like comfortable livings in this profession. So I think that's what I was thinking when all of this happened with COVID was that everybody that was in school, that was young, that's like, oh my God, everything stopped. Like there's just nothing going on, but it just seems like it's as strong as ever. Seems like people kind of recalibrated, figured out what they wanted to do in their lives. And did you have that existential moment where you had to say, all right, is this something that we really want to do? Or do we stay in public education to get a good pension? That kind of thing. How does that work?
Um, I think for me it was always temporary. Like I don't think I ever was like, oh, I want to be in education forever.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted. I was kind of like, I don't know if I still want to move to New York. But it was definitely there was a moment of like, I mean, I applied to Starbucks jobs, like I was just like, there was a moment of like, maybe music isn't even like, I don't think it was like, am I going to be a teacher? It was just like music at large. It was like, is that the move?
Yeah.
Or should I maybe go in a different direction?
So
I'm, oh,
go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, 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 you're good.
For me, I had the opposite kind of issue because if there, like respectfully, if there was anything else I could do, I would do it. Because it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard and it takes a lot of you. But there was never a time that I sat and thought like, maybe I could do this. And I love teaching. I actually did my undergrad music education. So it was always going to be a part of my path. And I think
Okay.
in this line of work, like you do it whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
But I just knew it had to be this. And so I was just weighing my options, if I'm teaching, at least I'm getting to touch music every day and give music every day. So it was just like, what's going to make sense? What's going to make money? But I think we were fortunate enough that even in that time that we were like, what are we going to do? We were working quite a bit. So even if we both weren't teaching or doing all this, like, I think we'd have still like been able to stay afloat.
So are you Indigo Girls fans?
I'm not. I don't know who that is. I'm sorry.
Really? You don't?
I
Man,
don't.
you need to look them up. They're really, really, really good. They were
Okay.
kind of like folk, underground, yet became commercially successful in the 90s. And they were friends that hooked up early on in life in Atlanta. They're huge. I mean, just look them up and I mean, they're wonderful. But your story, it's funny because they have a documentary that just came out. I mean, they're huge, and I can't believe they haven't had a story that's exposed their lives and who they are. But they performed, they knew each other in high school and they rose to fame and they kind of go through their whole tapestry and it's totally fascinating. So anyways, give them a listen. I was just because
Okay.
there's similarities with the friendship and kind of the intersection of music and what you are doing now. But before you met, take me back to your beginnings and how music and more specifically jazz became your focal point.
Favorite, favorite? I don't know.
You go first.
Okay, fine. So I, it's weird. I mean, I didn't grow up in a musical household. My mom loved music and always played music, and I was always listening to like oldies radio. But she never liked jazz. My mom thinks jazz is old people music, and she'll say that.
Yeah.
But so I just loved to sing. And when I was younger, my mom could kind of hear, my family could kind of hear that I could sing, and I was lucky enough to attend a elementary school that had like a music class with a strings program and a drama program. And it was just a public school in Miami, but I went there and kind of they had like a chorus, and so I really took an interest in music class. But it really wasn't until fifth grade that I participated in a in a Broadway production, Broadway, like a drama factory performance of Annie Jr.
Okay.
And y'all audition, and it was not my first time auditioning for a role, but I got the role of Miss Hannigan,
Nice.
and it was such a great experience for me. But then I broke my leg, like kind of at the
Oh,
beginning of rehearsals. They were intense with these rehearsals,
yeah.
and I broke my leg, and they were gonna recast me because they recasted like an understudy who's actually still a great friend of mine, which is hilarious. And I was like, no, I'm gonna do this. Like I earned this, like I need to do this. So I was like, I'm gonna walk on my cast. I didn't care. I was just like, I want to do this. So and we did the show, we did the run of shows, we did like a week of shows in the day and the night. And I remember on the last day, there's a wheelchair on the set of the show for another character. And so they would wheel me around. And I remember on the last day, the principal of the school like stood up and was saying, everybody congratulate these students for doing an amazing job. And she took a second and she was like, oh, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Miss Hannigan here has been like performing all these shows with like a broken leg. You know what commitment, what dedication. And I got a standing ovation. And I was just like, this is it. This is the
Wow.
thing. This is the only feeling that I'm going to chase forever because it was just like when I knew I needed to have music in my life. From there, I went on to like a magnet middle school that had like a chorus program, and I was kind of studying classically up until high school, where I was able to get into some more diverse music. And then when in 10th grade, we had like a jazz vocal ensemble, and it was like loosely based around jazz. A lot of these kids, they don't know the genre per se, but we're singing the arrangements and we're learning the music. And that's when I really took an interest. The friends that I had surrounded myself with were really interested in jazz. And so I would kind of like go home and do some research, like who's Miles Davis? Who are all these
Yeah.
people? And start listening to Pandora standards radio just to kind of get this music. And then, I had experience with a lot of kinds of music, but it wasn't until I found jazz that I felt like, my voice sits here. Like this is where it
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I was singing pop and all the stuff, classical, and you do it, but this is where I was like, oh, this fits. And I never felt like it was outdated, by the lyrics. It was just like very charming for me and very like easy for me to play into that. So that's kind of how I found music and then jazz.
So I got to know, before you did that performance, was there anybody that was a jokester that said, go out and break a leg? Did anybody say that to you?
Oh yeah, every day, every day.
That's what kept coming into my mind because you still did it. And it's that whole quote. I got to find out what the history of that is because it seems awfully brutal.
Yeah, I think my own mom probably told it to me like as a
Yeah.
joke. She would say
Yeah. Go
that.
break a leg. Yeah. That's wild. How about you? How did it all happen?
So I'm pretty opposite. I actually do come from a family of musicians. My dad's a musician, his dad's a musician, my dad's a bass player. And so literally from the day I was born, my house was always flooded with like musicians coming over and having jam sessions with my dad. And we always had a piano at the house. And so I always gravitated towards the piano specifically. And I started when I was young. I started taking lessons when I was 4 years old. My mom's cousin, I come from a Cuban background, and my mom's cousin had just gotten to the United States from Cuba. She studied in the Conservatory of Havana, and she was like, hey, like I know she's tiny and young, and but like she really wants to learn piano, and do you think like we could start taking lessons? And my cousin was just like, yeah, like, let's give it a shot. And, from then on, it was just like I started with classical. I went to a magnet middle school also. I went to a performing arts high school, and I was classical all throughout that time. I actually got into my performing arts high school not for piano, but for orchestral percussion. I played orchestral percussion for a while also. And I kept like checking out the jazz band. I was like, oh man, I want to do that. Like, I don't want to play percussion anymore. And there was at the time, my freshman year, the jazz director that had been there the whole time, he wasn't the jazz director for that year. He had given the position of the dean of music, just
Hmm.
because like an interim position, so he wasn't as involved. And there was this other jazz band director, and we went to this competition called Essentially Ellington in New York City.
Yeah.
And I was hungry. I was like, I want to play. We play three tunes, and I was like, I want to play one. And he, before like the competition, this band director was just like, hey, if you learn this tune really, really well, memorize it, perfect, you could play it in the competition. The other piano player, which he was a junior, he was incredible. He was like a prodigy. And so I was always kind of like trying to like steal his stuff and everything. And so I learned it, and we get to the competition, and we're about to go on stage, and the band director was just like, hey, we're actually going to have the senior or the junior play it, because he was known by the judges. He was like famous already in high school,
Yeah.
and he thought like, oh, that would be like a better in to like win the competition or whatever. And I'll never forget, that feeling was so crushing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like naturally like a very competitive person. And at
Hmm.
the time I was like, yeah, I want to be good at jazz. I wanted to play in the competition just to play in the competition, but it wasn't so much like to get good at jazz. I just
Yeah.
kind of wanted it that one particular moment. And then after that, I was just like, no, I'm gonna like start learning this music, and I'm gonna be like the best piano player that's
Yeah.
come through this program. And so it was kind of fuel to the fire. And then that the older piano player, he ended up graduating. I became like the main jazz pianist for the program. That director that was the dean of music for the 1 year, he came back to teaching being the jazz director, and he's an amazing pianist in Miami, all around. But he's like been located in Miami for a while now. Started taking private lessons with him, and then I went on to college and got my degrees in jazz piano performance.
So what was the one thing about, I mean, anybody out there, whether you're a fan or you're a musician, it's like the first show that you see is such a big deal. What was the first live show that you saw that you thought, I want to be up there one day, whether it's jazz or otherwise?
Well, I honestly didn't go to a ton of concerts when I was younger.
Yeah.
Um, you want to do?
Sure,
Yeah,
I'll
you
go.
have
Yeah.
yours because I don't. I have to think.
There was two for me. So the first one, my dad, like I said, he's a bass player, but he's more in like the salsa scene, Cuban music, stuff like that. And he would always push me to be like, play all the salsa music. He's like, there's more money there. Don't go to jazz. So he took me to a concert of Michelle Camilo
Yeah.
and Alfredo Rodriguez. It was like a duo piano concert, and it wasn't really jazz, it was more like Cuban music. But I was just like, wow, that's amazing, like I want to do that pianistically. And then I went to a concert, a Gary Burden concert, like a year later, and that was just like, he was just amazing, and it was like obviously jazz, and I was like, all right, this is
Yeah.
this is yeah.
For me, it was, I think, like I didn't go to many concerts. That wasn't like live music was not like a thing in our home. And I think for me that what you're saying is like when I saw somebody and I was like, I can do that and I will do that. I
Yeah.
think for a long time I kind of did music because everyone was like, you're such a good singer, like you're good at singing, and I do love it and I always loved it. But I think for me it was I was doing a competition when I was in high school, called the Great American Songbook High School Vocal Competition. That's long. And Jane Monheit was one of the judges and one of like the clinicians. And I think we were like all on stage and she came out and just her gown and just like it was not just the music, it was just the
Yeah.
whole experience of the show she was giving, the stage, we're on the stage with her, so we're watching the audience. It was just so grand and so glamorous to me that I was just like, and just her personality, because she's so wonderful and hilarious and cool. And so I just was like, I can do that and I want to do that. And
Yeah.
since then, she's become a great friend and mentor. So it's kind of full circle.
Well, it's interesting because they come from an old world. They kind of tie the old and new world together. Like Marilyn May. Are you familiar with Marilyn May, the jazz singer? So she's from Kansas City, but she's kind of had this like late in life rendezvous with New York. And a lot of hipsters and young people are like catching her and they're like, wow. Well, I saw her here probably in 18, 19. It was before the pandemic. And they just operate differently. Like I mean, she was sparkling. There was sequins, and in between sets, the piano player was playing kind of like a Jack Benny or a Johnny Carson kind of a, like ambiance. Like there's just this level of acumen that supersedes. It's like there's singer and musician, but there's also entertainer and performer.
Mhm.
There's that whole like thing. you know. So let me ask you this. What is it that you like the best about being a professional musician? What do you look forward to every day? What gets you up out of bed?
For me, the connections that I've made, the friendships that I've made, especially now in my job, like that I have now, it's rare that you get to like hang out with people who are just so passionate about the same thing that you're passionate about and get to share their stories. And when they come to town, it's like, I don't think if I did anything else, I would have this many friends that lived all over the world, you know? And so like when they come through the town and just like getting to share that experience and the way that music has touched them and has inspired them, I think that's the thing for me that that has been the greatest takeaway from finding this genre and finding this music and music overall. Um, yeah, for me.
I mean, that's obviously a really good one. I think for me though, also I have so much fun playing. Like whether it's the smallest of gigs in a restaurant where nobody's listening, or a festival. Like I just have so much passion for music and piano, and every time I play, like it's so much fun, and I just want to like transmit all that to the audience, and it's always such an awesome feeling to be able to like receive feedback after gigs or after performances, and they're like, I could just tell you're having so much fun, like it made me like have fun. And it's like that the music is for the audience, not for me or for the band. So that's kind of my thing that keeps me going. It's just like I want them to feel the happiness and the joy that like I feel every time I touch the piano.
Sure. Yeah, that's why we listen to it. So everyone out there has a perception of you, whether they've seen you live together, they've seen your album cover. There's always this perception. There's this public persona that you have to try to kind of like hammer down. But at the end of the day, you're two people, you're two friends, you're two musicians. Who are you? If anyone out there wants to know exactly who are you?
That's the hardest question I've ever been
Right.
asked.
That's that's the existential fork in the road right there.
You mean individually or as just like
Probably together. Like, who are
okay.
you individually? Like, who do you think you are? Because everybody has this perception of who they think you are. And then
Yeah.
who are you together as a unit?
I think we are the product of an excellent community. I think that our our time together has been forged by the community, for the community, in the community, like through and through. And I think that this is so hard.
Uh, well, it seems like it should be like a master's dissertation, but it
Yeah.
actually, I mean, you hit it. I mean, there's a simplicity in the complexity of it.
Yeah, I think, people are lucky enough to find each other for varying reasons, but I think that we were just lucky to be put in this place where not only were we like really the only two females doing what we were doing, but we're lucky enough to like the same stuff, and we're really just friends. Like I don't know if this would work if we really weren't as close of friends as we
Sure.
are. Because like when this whole thing started, like yeah, we were doing gigs, but so much of our lives lined up with one another, and now we're in the same place again. And it's really that simple. Like we just like each other. We just like each other's music. We like each other's company, and I think that's as good as it, like that's the whole thing, like even this album, like we were thinking about music to put on it, we were just like, oh, let's play music that we like, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it all just came from that, just like being true to who we are. And I think that's one thing we have in common. It's just like the music that we enjoy, and just like this is it, like this is the thing. There's no
Yep.
persona, there's no like branding, unfortunately. I know that's really helpful, but it's just like this is this thing, this
Yeah.
screenshot right now. That's it. That's the
That's it.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why I brought up the Indigo Girls too, because they've turned into this massive international, huge, iconic duo, and it started out as a friendship. It was a shared musical vision that turned into something that just kind of freaked both of them out. So you'll have to see it because it's wild how it just takes off, and they're just like, oh, okay, And I think that happens for a lot of people, when they get to that point. It's like you're just doing it because you want to do it, and whatever happens is going to happen. But if it takes off, that's when you're like, oh, wow, I thought I was getting on an airplane. Instead, I'm getting on a rocket ship, and there's
Yeah.
no seatbelt. So, um,
I think it's
so
also a really, sorry, a big
no, 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 you're good.
our
Yeah,
music is a reflection of our friendship, and anybody that
sure.
hears us play, they're always just like, it's like almost like you gotta like read each other's minds, and it's just like, I mean, obviously that comes through a lot of like from playing a lot together,
Yeah,
but I always say this, and it's kind of like one of our bits on like on the bandstand. It's just like I could tell like as an accompanist, like if she's sad, this is how I'm going to accompany her, how she's going to approach singing a specific song or whatever, and again, if we weren't as close friends, like it'd be like, I don't even know like how you're feeling. I don't know anything, It's just
yeah,
like let me just treat it just like another singer. So
yeah.
it's a solid reflection.
So the new album, I'm on my way. If anyone wants to pick up a copy, if they want to catch you live, any of the good business and news in your world, where do they go?
Yeah, so we have a website. So it's been a little crazy because Frenchie was actually in basic training for the past like 2.5 months. So like we had the album come out and then I kind of had to do all these things behind the scenes. So we're working on her website, but right now we have a page on my website. It's called melindarosemusic.com. And there's a tab at the top that says Melinda and Frenchy. And right there is all the information about our album, our reviews that we've had come out. We've had quite a few reviews. Where you can find it, on Apple Music, on Spotify, on all the tunes, all the stores, Amazon Prime, it's out there. Um, and as of right now, she just got here like maybe like a week ago today, I think. And so we don't have anything lined up just yet, but we are working on some things. But that's where you can find the album.
Okay,
And you can follow us on Instagram.
that's it. Yep. And that'll be the stay tuned part of it. So yeah, for sure. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking a minute out to talk about the music, to talk about your history. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for talking to us.
Yeah.
We're always, that's one thing you can get us to do is talk. So
Yeah, right. No, I get it.